Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Tuesday's edition, and yes folks, we are broadcasting from sunny Irvine, California. Happy to have you with us today, and happy to welcome back Drew Allen. Drew, you're in Northern California. I'm in Southern California broadcasting. Happy to have you back with me after an extended absence. Welcome back to the show.
It's good to be here. We survived the hurricane and climate change. Here we are, standing.
Yeah, well, I cannot not tell you how many people back east. Well, what was it like out there? What was it like? I said it was like a typical rainy day in Florida. So, but I mean, in all fairness, the desert communities did get hit quite hard. There was a lot of flooding. There was a lot of mudslides. Same for the mountain communities. Along coastal Orange County, LA, a lot of rain, a lot of some flooding, but that was about the extent of it. Listen, outside of the weather, Drew, again, it's great having you back. And folks, Drew is the proud father of a 5-month-old girl. That's why he's been an extended stay. I know he's a regular on the show, and a lot of you like him. So, Drew, again, congratulations on your baby girl, and we're happy she's doing great.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's life-changing for sure to be a father, and it just it makes all the things we talk about that much more meaningful and urgent, to be honest. When I look at my daughter and I say, man, what kind of country am I going to give you?
Yeah, well, let's get into it, because I got to tell you something. It's been, to say, some troubling headlines. But before we get into the state of the U.S. economy, the two topics before us, and really we can intertwine these topics. The debate stage has been set for tomorrow in Milwaukee. And then again, I know your viewers and mine, they're equally pissed off about what's happening in Georgia, where Trump is actually going to go to jail, be arraigned, have his mugshot taken. His lawyer had that done today or yesterday. There's 18 co-defendants. I don't know which one you want to go with first, but we'll start with the Trump one, because it's really ticked off a lot of people. I mean, this is actually happening. I mean, it's not like how he had the federal indictment. This is actually a state who is charging a former president. And I've looked at these charges. Drew, again, I'm not trying to be judge, jury here, but my God, our country really is dissolving before our eyes based upon what some prosecutor who campaigned on this issue said she would do. And I'll be damned, she's now done it. And this is, of all the cases Trump's dealing with, there are some problematic issues with this.
Well, look, nothing I say here is hyperbole. I just think, just as I preface here, when you're living through history, it's different than when you look back and read about the Civil War or read about the American Revolution. When it happened to other people, what they did, it has this significance that we seem to miss sometimes when we're actually in the moment. And I can very plainly explain to you and everyone else that this is really the third test in our country's history. I mean, we had the American Revolution, we had a Civil War to keep the Union together, and this is really the third significant challenge like this domestically we have faced. It is that serious. I'll just give people a couple of examples to explain how severe this is. Obviously, the upshot of what they're doing is to get rid of elections. That's what this effectively amounts to. They're trying to go to the 14th Amendment now, a civil rights amendment, to try and take Trump off the ballot in certain states. That's what this is about. Don't buy this lie and conspiracy theory by never Trumpers or Democrats that Democrats are pursuing this avenue and trying to prevent Trump from running because they want him to be the nominee. It doesn't make sense because it's not true. It's a stupid backwards way of them trying to say, oh, we can't go with Trump. He can't possibly win, and so on and so forth. But all that's kind of irrelevant to the point that Democrats are interfering now for the third time in U.S. elections by trying, at a bare minimum, they're interfering with his ability to campaign, best case scenario, right. All of that. The very things that they claimed as reasons they wouldn't pursue investigations into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden in 2020, right? They didn't want to interfere in the election. Well, that's out the window, and they're doing that now. This is the first time, this is the fourth time he's been indicted now, I guess, but right. This is the first time in U.S. history that a president or former president has been indicted. Now, to be clear, General Lee, right, who led the Confederacy, A grand jury actually did indict him on charges of treason, but those charges were actually later dropped. So the person who led the Confederacy wasn't treated this way.
Right.
Bill Clinton, of course, he famously committed perjury. That was a federal crime. He lied to a grand jury and said he didn't have sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky. He also tried to obstruct the proceedings and so on and so forth. But the special prosecutor in that case ended up ultimately dropping those indictments, not going forward with him in exchange for him saying, oops, I'm sorry, and paying a $25,000 fine. So here we are in unprecedented territory. You've basically ensured that nobody's going to accept election results anymore.
Yeah, it's hard.
That's what this amounts to.
It's hard to fathom how anyone could, because you have a situation. I mean, if you take some of the words that they're using to prosecute Trump et al., okay, John Eastman, his attorney, Giuliani, Meta, I mean, this is like they threw it's typical of what happens in federal cases. Not sure much in state, but obviously they threw literally everything up against the wall to see what they could possibly stick, hoping to flip people. And it's reminiscent to me, some of the words they're using to persecute and prosecute Trump were the same words Her Majesty Stacey Abrams used when she lost the first election. Heck, she was still calling herself Governor Abrams after the election. I mean, Drew, it's astounding. The rules simply do not apply to Democrats, and yet they apply to Republicans. And every time, bar none, that these situations have happened, I mean, the Republican Party is not abandoning the former president one iota. I mean, we haven't seen any evidence of it. Now, again, no votes cast, obviously, until January. But, Drew, I mean, the comparables between what Democrats do and Republicans, you got to be sitting here scratching your head. And just like you tied it in with Hunter Biden, there is not equal justice if you're a celebrity politician and you're running for office.
No, this is a display of raw political power. The Democrats are rubbing it in our faces, and they're daring us to do anything about it. This is also very dangerous because, the Constitution, the Founding Fathers were very clear. It's actually we the people who have the power and those in politics who are serving us, right? That's what's so unique about the American system. And also, we have something unique called the consent of the governed. This is just reality about any government, period, especially a democracy republic like ours. This country can only proceed, the government can only function so long as the American citizen, because we are the majority, right? As long as we consent to the laws. Right. We get anarchy if that falls away. And that's really where this is headed. Abraham Lincoln warned about this 20 years before the Civil War. If the government's not going to abide by the laws, if the government's going to violate the laws, if the government's going to sit idly by and allow this type of persecution, this lawlessness to take out innocent law-abiding Americans who want peace, well, at some point, Americans are going to look around and say, hey, I've got a thought in my head. This government's not working for me. Maybe we should exchange it for another. That's really where this heads, if you want to be philosophical about it. I mean, it's also a practical matter, but Donald Trump hasn't committed a single crime. Just because you can get a partisan grand jury, which can indict a ham sandwich, people need to understand about grand juries too. The Democrats are smart. Caesar, Napoleon, all these dictators, they would never let the Constitution stand in their way of achieving their political power. And it's the same thing here. The grand jury is a perfect system to corrupt because a grand jury is supposed to be completely secretive, right? You only have to have a majority. You don't have to have unanimous consent to get some kind of verdict, and you don't have a defense, right? So a grand jury, you only have the prosecution. So in this case, you see how it's biased. So for example, in the D.C. case, just to go back to that, they're all tied together. They're all about it's illegal to question election results if you're a Republican or Donald Trump. But, he goes in and he plays video of Donald Trump selectively. He leaves out and omits the part where Donald Trump says, make your voices peacefully and patriotically heard. So he omits that. So there's no way to enforce this. It's up to the prosecution's conscience, right? To include that evidence which would actually show that Donald Trump wasn't guilty. But furthermore, you're right. Democrats have done this. Hillary Clinton questioned the 2016 election results, still doesn't believe that he's legitimate. You had Jimmy Carter saying that he's only president because the Russians interfered. you've had this alternate elector. Now they're calling them fake electors. This is part of the Electoral Count Act of 1876. This is lawful. You have alternate electors. This is how our system works in elections. And Democrats have done this and schemed in the same way too,
Yeah.
to send their fake electors. The only difference here is it might have actually worked had J6 not interfered and coerced all of those U.S. senators that were Republicans to just rubber stamp the certification process for Joe Biden. That's the reality. But there's a lot of history to this, and unfortunately, Americans aren't taught this, and so it's ripe for betraying the American people, bamboozling the American people, and convincing them that this is some kind of lawful thing that the Democrats are doing when it's not. Donald Trump didn't violate the law. Questioning election results, that's like football. That's like a sport in America now. And we do have a lawful process of actually contesting them, especially when there is evidence of voter fraud.
Yeah, and you have a right to go through your contesting it, and just because you go through that right doesn't make it illegal. But again, we're going to have to deal with this. It is going to literally play out, folks, before our eyes as the 2024 election season comes upon us. Now, before we get to 2024, and again, Donald Trump may be the Republican nominee. Right now, he is the prohibitive favorite. I mean, Drew, polls I look at show him 20 to 40 points up. There's not a state I've seen where he's up less than 20. Now, obviously, that can change when the voting starts, but we have to acknowledge he is the prohibitive favorite. But let's turn our attention to what's going to happen tomorrow night. I personally did not agree with Trump's decision to not participate in the debate, but you know what? He's president, former president, and I'm not. So obviously he made some pretty damn good decisions to get there. So Trump's not going to be there tomorrow night. As a result, again, no Trump surrogates are going to be there tomorrow night, which, I mean, a lot of people will criticize Fox News for that. I actually think it's fairly fair. If he's not going to participate, don't have the surrogates. But again, let's talk about the 8 contenders, Drew, that will be in that debate tomorrow night. Because look, either Donald Trump or one of those 8 will be the Republican nominee for president unless all hell breaks loose. No one can get any majority and someone else comes in from the outside. There are a couple possible names, but let's focus on the 8. Front and center is going to be Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy. Then we have the other 6. Drew, your first impressions when you saw how they drew the debate stage with Ramaswamy and with DeSantis in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, look, those are the only 2 people who are really contenders. Let's be honest. A lot of things aren't going to change between now and November, in my opinion. I mean, look, apart from the conversation, of course, that Democrats could succeed in convincing certain states to just remove Donald Trump from the ballot, things like that. Right. Look, Ron DeSantis has run objectively one of the worst campaigns in U.S. history. He's advised poorly. Some of the mistakes are his. Some it's just because of the people he's surrounded himself with. That's just the reality. You can't say he's run a successful campaign when, Ron DeSantis was supposed to be neck and neck with Donald Trump, the big contender, and he's not even close. He's dropping in the polls. Some polls show Vivek Ramaswamy actually surpassing him, but nonetheless, that's what we're looking at. None of the other people are really relevant. Larry Elder, they won't allow on the debate stage, even though he said he could prove 1%. They said one of those polls didn't count because it was a Trump poll. I don't know. I would actually love to hear from Larry Elder. I think he would add something, but whatever. We got the 8 people on there. Some of them are just never Trumpers. Their sole existence of running is because Democrats are funding them and want them to run because they want to hurt Donald Trump. That's people like Chris Christie. All right. Mm-hmm. Those people are losers. They couldn't even overcome, a successful lap band surgery. And so, he also is not going to become president ever. But that's Chris Christie. I really can't stand these guys. They're really sick, perverted individuals that are twisted. It's hard to fathom that this happens in our party. But nonetheless, I expect DeSantis to put up a strong show. I think Ramaswamy will put up a strong show. It'll really be between those 2, in my opinion. And, this is really about, okay, who's number 2? That's the reality. And honestly, these people should be grateful that Donald Trump's not going to be on the debate stage tomorrow because, they'll actually have some time. They'll actually have attention focused on them. Nobody's going to pay attention to them because, yeah, there are people out there that say, "Oh, I'm upset. He should debate." Why? I mean, I get it. I get it from a pragmatic standpoint. Like, you'd like to see the guy debate, but we know where Donald Trump stands on these issues for the most part. He's been president before, and the elephant in the room is this really isn't about the presidential nomination. Yeah. It's about number two.
Yeah, and let me add some commentary to that. Okay, Ron DeSantis was and is an extremely successful governor in the state of Florida. Won by 20 points in his last election. And you are right. He was supposed to be doing better than he has. Again, I go back to what I've said before. He needs to have a strong debate performance tonight because the first votes aren't cast until January. Ramaswamy, boy, I tell you, when I first started talking about him, he was sub 1%. So if he didn't go any higher than he is right now, this guy has burst onto the scene. He's a young man. What is he, mid-30s, Drew? Something along those lines?
He's a couple years, he's like 37 or something. 37, he's like a year or two older than me.
Yeah. So, I mean, sharp young guy. And then, he's got ideas. People may not always agree with him, but he's not afraid to step out and throw out ideas that he actually believes in. And you got to give a guy credit for just accomplishing what he's accomplished so far. I think there's three other names that they have to perform in no particular order. Tim Scott, big money behind Tim Scott. A lot of people like him. Is he campaigning for number two? Maybe. Nikki Haley, she already served in the Trump administration, UN ambassador, well-known figure. And then, of course, you have Vice President Mike Pence, who Trump supporters absolutely loathe. But Mike Pence, you can make an argument, has been a rock-solid Republican his whole life. I mean, the guy had a successful track record in the House, was Trump's vice president, served as governor of Indiana. So, Mike Pence epitomized what a Republican was. So, there are, I believe, people that have to distinguish themselves. North Dakota Governor Burgum, who was the founder of Great Plains Software. I didn't realize that until I did a little research on him. The guy's a very successful governor of North Dakota. Now, does that make him presidential timber? I don't know, but we've seen it happen in the past. So, Drew, I guess my point is this. I hope tomorrow night, when people are on that stage, that it's not just a gotcha question or people look. We really hear why people want to be president and what their positions are, and not what some coach who's coaching in the debate said, well, you got to say this about Trump. Am I too optimistic or am I?
Look, if it devolves into something that's Trump bashing, they're all going to tank.
Right.
The reality is MAGA's still here, MAGA's still strong, and you need that support if you want to replace Donald Trump. And that's the big mistake that some of these this is precisely why Ramaswamy, who no one had heard of until he announced, just less than a year ago, I guess, is rising in the polls, and why someone as popular as DeSantis is arguably just sinking in the polls. And it's because you can't attack Donald Trump as it relates to these indictments going on, right? You have to be able to, it's a hard thing to ask, right? If you're trying to compete for Donald Trump's job, right? Obviously that pits you against him. And so you have to be able to do something unique that requires a lot of principle. You have to be able to defend Donald Trump while you are trying to beat him, right? And that's where DeSantis has failed. And I'll just be honest with you. I know there are people listening that love DeSantis. That's fine. But my problem with DeSantis, because I loved him as governor of Florida, I will still defend, the decisions and things he's done in Florida. He's been a great governor, but he's failed miserably when it comes to recognizing the seriousness and gravity of this moment in U.S. history, right? I understand he doesn't like Trump. There's bad blood between them, but he's been really ineffective and very weak every time one of these indictments comes out. He says, well, I haven't had a chance to read the indictment. I'm going to fire. So he'll go after the problem sort of superficially, like we've got to reform the FBI and so on and so on, but he won't mention Trump by name, and he won't just come out and defend Trump. And that's the problem here. You see, this is the most important issue we face, which is the corruption of DC and the Democrat Party and their interference in elections, their indictments of a former president of the United States, their interference in trying to prevent the leading GOP candidate from running for president and taking that off the table. That's the thing, right? We want to make our voices peacefully and patriotically heard, right? We want the opportunity to reject all of this at the ballot box. And the Democrats want to take that peaceful option off the table. And that's what's so scary about what they're doing. And DeSantis can't seem to bring himself to say what they're doing to Trump is wrong. Trump didn't do anything wrong. This is outrageous. So he doesn't have the spirit of Lincoln. He doesn't have the spirit of these great leaders in American history. And if he can't prove that, he's just not going anywhere, no matter what loyal support he has.
Yeah, and now look, a history lesson here, folks. We've had presidents who lost the first time they ran and came back and won again. I'll name two of them, Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. So look, you're right. The integrity of the ballot is on the issue, and I hope that is discussed, when they talk tomorrow night. Let me move on to some issues that, you're describing about how, our government really is not following its own rules at this point. The president goes out to Maui. Horrific situation out there. And we're not going to get into what caused it because a lot of crazy Democrats are blaming climate. People that really know what's going on are saying, no, it's been developing over the years with agriculture, brushland, etc. There was ample warnings. I'm not getting into that. And I'm not qualified to give an opinion on that. But I am qualified to give an opinion as follows. Drew, when I watch the president and he's joking, talking about how the ground's hot and falling asleep, I'm sitting here just pulling my hair out saying, who in the world could vote for this man? Because he's clearly not there. And yet the Democrats, unless something odd happens, they're poised to nominate this guy again. And, it's a 50-50 who's going to win. Most of the polls show Biden and Trump 2, 3, 4 points between margin of error on either side. And it just, to me, it's almost an embarrassment watching this guy represent us in a moment where 110 people have officially been killed. There's still damn near 800 people missing. I mean, it's really bad. I mean, what are your thoughts on this, Drew, on what you've seen coming out of Hawaii?
Well, I think that we see even Democrat voters being lost.
Yeah.
Right? There's something happening with these tragedies and the horrific response that shows just negligence, absolute callousness and indifference from this president and the Democrat Party that is leaving Democrats, right? Hawaii votes for Democrats.
Yes.
And Joe Biden showed up and was met with the "Let's go Brandon," except they actually said the word, F you.
Yeah. That's
what they were saying to him. That's powerful. And I don't mean to go off topic, drag me back on if we need to, Mark, but this is why I say, all of this time wasted saying Trump can't win a general election and so on and so forth, that's garbage. That's from people who just really don't want him. That's people who want DeSantis over him. If we would actually just back him and unify now and take moments like this and just let what is happening just continue to pervade in people's minds and hearts, Donald Trump's support will continue to grow. And I don't think it's even close in 2024, to be honest, when you're comparing these two things. But we're doing it to ourselves, right? Sitting here saying Trump, the Democrats don't do it. Why are we doing this? It's like, Trump can't win in 2024, even though he has a great record and everything else. But we sit here with Joe Biden, the worst president in American history, and we pretend like he can beat. Why are we not having this optimistic attitude where we bring people to our table and say, this is the easiest guy to beat in the world, Joe Biden, not Donald Trump. If we did that, things would change. But nonetheless, Joe Biden, this is like, we've had so many let them eat cake moments, right?
Yeah.
Joe Biden, 14 days later, shows up. He gives people $700. Meanwhile, he's sending, Ukraine and other whatever billions and billions. But here's your $700 lifetime check. You're welcome. We don't know how many hundreds of dead children who were probably burned alive. We can't get answers about this. If you wanted to follow a playbook of how to murder and kill and destroy your own people in a fire, they followed this textbook. They deprived the firefighters from having access to water for 5 hours. They did not turn on their emergency signal, so people didn't even, it was like Pompeii. It's like the volcano blew up and it's too late. Nobody can get out of there. I mean, this is one of the most gruesome natural disasters or responses, I think, maybe in our history. There's a lot of examples you'd have to comb through, but I mean, it's hard to think of something that could go worse than this. Yeah. And you have the president show up. He's sleeping. He's making comments about how hot the ground is. Yeah. He's smiling, optics. And then you have him talking about how trying to relate to people whose son burned to death in a fire. And he's saying, well, you know, I almost lost my Corvette one time. Lightning struck my kitchen and we put out the fire quickly, but I can imagine what it's like to be you. This guy is like,
he's tone deaf.
Yeah, this is like French Revolution kind of feelings that are going to be out there because of this.
Yeah, and it leads me, and your point is exactly right. Look, I mentioned those polls closed for a specific reason. You followed through on it on cue. Look, Donald Trump, at this point, again, leading our field by 20 to 40 points. He has at least a 50% chance of winning this election. If he, again, assuming it's Trump and Biden, and again, we're not going to talk about no labels and third parties right now, but look, when you see liberal polls showing it plus or minus 2%, you know, it doesn't matter who you're for. You can read the numbers and say, hey, the last election, you know, it came down to thousands of votes in 8 states. Well, guess what? This election's not going to be any different. I can predict right now 41 states where they're going to go, and I'll bet you dollars to donuts, and I'm going to be 100% right on those 41 states. So we're going to have an election decided by probably 9 states. You know them as well as I do. And yeah, he could win. Going back to where you were leading this on incompetence in government and simply not following the rules, you know, didn't the Supreme Court, Drew, say that student loan forgiveness, we're not going to do that? Was my memory missing or something? Or wasn't that like a major case where Biden tried to bribe all the students that had debt? Some of them aren't students, some of them are grandparents now. But anyhow, people that borrowed money to go to school, tried to forgive it all. The Supreme Court said no. And yet, here again, headlines today, Biden's changing the rules. If you used to be at like 150% of the poverty level, now it's up to 250%. An individual making less than 32 grand a year, he says, well, you pay zero. Family of 4 making 67,000, you pay zero. Come next July, we're going to cut it from 10% of disposable income to 5%. I'm sitting here saying, wait a minute, didn't the court rule that this couldn't happen? And yet they're writing rules to forgive it anyhow. And I'm saying, what the hell's going on here?
Well, this goes in tandem essentially with their assault on our elections, right? They have no regard for the rule of law. It's the Democrats who call the Supreme Court illegitimate. They've been making the case time and time again, attacking Clarence Thomas, even making up stories that didn't exist. For example, attacking him for going on this yacht trip that he actually never went on, it turns out. But anyway, attacking them as illegitimate, setting up the stage for what's happening right now, which is, look, if it's a policy that we Democrats think's important, screw the Constitution, screw the Supreme Court. The law is the Democrat Party. It's like Fauci, I am the science. The Democrats say, I am the law. What we say is lawful. All right. You know, if we want to say that Donald Trump can't question election results and put him in prison, we can, because we're the law. Hillary Clinton, she can question them, but she's a Democrat, so it's okay.
Right.
You know, this is where it's the same thing here. I mean, it's just outrageous. We have never seen such just, how do I say it, brazen disregard. You know, we saw this with the eviction moratorium, right? Yeah. Where Joe Biden comes out, the Supreme Court said, you can't do this. And he says, well, I know that the body of legal scholars out there, you know, they've said this wouldn't pass constitutional muster, but it'll at least buy us some time and it'll be held up, it will sue, so on and so forth. So this is where they are. Yeah. So it doesn't matter. I mean, Supreme Court says you can't do it. They just come up with something else. Same thing, by the way, with the EPA, right? EPA versus West Virginia with regulating coal plant emissions.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court said you cannot have the EPA, unelected bureaucrats, destroy an entire industry. It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. And so what did Joe Biden do in response to that? Well, he ordered the EPA to do it again. So now we still have this going on. So it's just crazy. And this is the problem. There's no repercussions for these people. Look, if we did like just like a tenth of what they're doing, we'd all be in jail, Mark. We'd all be in prison for the rest of our lives. And these people commit more heinous offenses and nothing happens to them because there's no apparatus to rein them in, except us in the ballot box, which they're trying to take away.
Right, and on some of these pieces, they like partially comply with the law, but then they write the rules to get around it. You know, you mentioned the environmental. There was just a ruling came out yesterday about some whale species in the Gulf of Mexico that's in the endangered list, and all of a sudden now they're writing rules so they can't do as much drilling in the Gulf. And while here in California we're paying back up to $5.50 a gallon, folks, it's coming near you too. Believe me, if these energy prices keep going up. Drew,
by the way, Mark.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the whales and how they're saying it's an endangered species to prevent drilling, and yet who is it and what's responsible for killing whales by the dozens? It's these frickin' windmills. These turbines they're setting up that are disrupting their sonar, whatever, all that stuff, and they're dying. Yeah. So that's again pick and choose.
Pick and choose is right. Well, we're going to pick and choose on we're going to close on some economic issues right now because, Drew, despite the fact that Biden touts Bidenomics, and he's, it's working great. Look, certain parts of the economy are working great, but it's not because of Bidenomics. Yes, we have 3.5% unemployment. Yes, we have inflation coming down because of 9 Federal Reserve rate hikes. We're currently around 5.5 on the Fed funds rate. But it was interesting, Drew, and I mentioned this on another show. While Biden's touting, quote, Bidenomics, his vice president is saying simultaneously, same day, 40% of Americans, 60% of Americans have less than $400 in their bank account and they're one paycheck away from bankruptcy. And Drew, with gasoline popping up where it is, home prices still continuing to escalate. Most people that have low interest rate mortgages, they don't even want to look at buying a new home. And then the price of automobiles skyrocketing, American Airlines employees, pilots got a 45% pay increase. Drew, these inflation costs could reignite because the average American is really feeling these costs, and no wonder they're saying Bidenomics doesn't work for me. And this is coming from arguably a commander-in-chief that has worse economic policies dating back to even Jimmy Carter era.
Yeah, what's remarkable about how bad the Biden economy is that it's actually even worse than the Carter economy. A lot of the metrics they use to measure a lot of these things, even the CPI, for example, they've changed it so much since the 70s that if you actually did it apples to apples, for example, when inflation was at its peak of 9.5%, it would have been closer to like 16% if you use the same metrics as during Carter. So, there's a lot of funny business going on where they're in control of changing the weight of certain values, right? So something that I don't really rely on might be down and bringing the average down, but groceries, gas, the things that we actually really depend upon that have the most impact on our wallets, well, those things are still going up. And people have to remember, when he says inflation has come down, that's nothing to celebrate per se, because inflation compounds. It's not like last month inflation was 4%. This month, it's 3%. So things are cheaper. No, things increased by 3% this month instead of 4%. So, there are a lot of games they play. And, the last numbers that came out, inflation is ticking back up. Now, it's not where it was before, but I don't have any confidence that it won't get there again. This administration is doing the opposite of quote unquote Reaganomics. Bidenomics is not Reaganomics, and we need Reaganomics. Which is, look, they need to grow GDP. That's the only thing that's going to save us and get us out of this. And everything they're doing is to take money out of the private sector and to discourage businesses from growth. Wages are not keeping up with inflation, of course. And so that's eating away. So it doesn't matter. Like, even any nominal decrease in inflation doesn't mean anything unless wage growth outpaces it. So everyone still has less money in their pockets than they did. And this is the thing I don't understand, Mark. Like, if you're just objective and you have any sense of self-preservation for yourself and your family, we all lived under the Trump administration and we've all lived under the Biden administration. Objectively, it's like Reagan asked during the one debate he had with Jimmy Carter. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Are you better off under the Biden economy, national security, anything, the border? Are you better off under Biden than you were under Trump? Objectively, no American can claim they are better off under the Biden presidency and this administration than the Trump administration. And really, that should be the gold standard in 2024. That's the only question that really matters if you care about your family and your future.
Yeah, and those same words that resonated, think about it, almost 50 years ago are true today. Because everything that you just talked about under President Trump, whether it be the economy, inflation, border security, international relations. I'll just cite the Saudis and Israel as two examples. You know, the country, the war in Ukraine didn't exist when Trump was president. You know, Kim Jong-un was rattling his sabers. Not when Trump was president, he wasn't. Oh, no, 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 no. So it's like, again, where were we 4 years ago versus where we are now? And I think your point is spot on about where we are right now, and more importantly, Drew, the ramifications if we don't get it right in 2024. Folks, can you imagine just looking at our current president, who, I mean, Drew, when I look at it again, I've made this statement before, he just doesn't look like he's in control. I wonder who is in control. When I see these decisions being made, and I see a guy that can't even stay awake in Hawaii, I'm saying, who is making the policies in this country? They may stick him out in front of a microphone and say it's his policy. You and I know damn good and well it's not so. Whatever leftists are running our government right now, God help us if we can't defeat this man coming up in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, either the president of the United States is not the hardest job in the world, as we've been told. It's actually the easiest job in the world, or you know, you have a cabal of leftists running the country and the president's irrelevant at this point. I mean, that's real. This guy was on vacation for like 7 days and another 14 days, and he comes back for 2 days and he has lunch with Kamala Harris and he goes on vacation again. I mean, this guy doesn't work. And so we know he's not in charge of anything. He has to be led off the stage, and on the stage, the administration is constantly coming out and saying, oh, he didn't mean to say that. This is what he really meant. It's just one disaster after the other. And of course, I think that we do know, you know, it's a little, it just gets old talking about, but it's true. This is the third Obama term. You know, Obama's still in D.C. He spends most of his time there, as a matter of fact. He's actually not at Martha's Vineyard. I mean, that's a good thing because people die when he's home in Martha's Vineyard. So he's in D.C. where apparently people aren't drowning. Maybe he doesn't have a pool. And so he spends his time there. He's on that. We know that he's having meetings with all these people in the so-called Biden administration. And somehow there's no media that's interested in staking out his property and seeing who's coming and going. That'd be it. Forget the guest list at the White House. I want to see the guest list at Obama's house. But, you know, that said, it's all of Obama's people that are in this administration anyway, the same people. So, I mean, you know what's going on. The same ideology is pervasive. And the biggest gift the Democrats got, I mean, it's kind of counterintuitive, but having a oatmeal-brained individual in the White House who spends most of his time in hiding, it's actually the best thing that could have happened to the Democrats.
Isn't it amazing, Drew? He ran a basement strategy, running for the presidency, never leaving his basement, and now he's in the White House, and it hasn't improved a great deal. Drew, 30 seconds left. Close this out for today. Where do we go from here?
Well, look, I just think that people, you know, there's a couple ways to look at what's going on. There's not a silver lining per se. You know, things are hard and they're going to get worse. But, you know, we are, you know, the patriots of 1776. You know, Abraham Lincoln talked about the pillars of liberty, right, that held up this temple of liberty that the founding fathers built for us. And every generation, once in a while, those pillars come down. We forget about their memory. And new people have to step up and hold up this temple that is the United States of America. And that's our job. That's our responsibility. You know, it just comes with being an American. And just get ready, dig in, and at least have some. I get excited about it in that sense, Mark. You know, I get to live through history. I get to be somebody who can tell my children and grandchildren what I did, you know, to preserve this country for them. And I'm not giving up on it, and we're not giving up on
No.
it. It's going to be hard. We've been here before. We will get through this together. Stand up, be influencers in your community, and be Americans, for God's sake.
True. I couldn't close it out any better. I echo exactly what you just said. And again, love having you back, brother. Thanks for joining me today. All the best up in Northern Cal. And again, congratulations again on your baby daughter. And it's a pleasure seeing you back on Schaftlein Report.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, folks, we'll be back on Thursday. I know we hit some hard issues today, but folks, it's out there in clear sight. Pay attention. We'll analyze the debate, and hopefully it turns out to be a good one. See you on Thursday. Have a good evening.